The alien classroom buzzed with quiet conversation as the instructor's holographic figure materialized at the front of the room. Professor T.R. Vox, a member of the well-regarded Vilith race, adjusted his multi-limbed cloak before speaking. His voice carried a practiced blend of authority and calmness. Today, he began, we will continue our study of Death World species. And of course, no discussion of such creatures would be complete without addressing the most perplexing and, frankly, disturbing species we have ever encountered. Homo sapiens. Otherwise known as humans. The young aliens seated in the amphitheater-style classroom leaned forward, their diverse faces reflecting a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Most of them hailed from planets so peaceful that the idea of danger itself was largely theoretical. To them, the designation of Earth as a death world, the category given to planets teeming with environmental hostility and aggressive evolution, was akin to myth. Humans, by extension, were anomalies, fragile, emotionally unpredictable and resource-poor creatures that somehow survived on a planet trying to kill them at every turn. A Uveran student, identifiable by his shimmering, scale-like skin, raised a clawed hand. Professor T.R. Vox, if I may? How could such a species, with their physical frailty and short lifespans, endure the rigors of a death world? Surely they survive through sheer luck? The room filled with murmurs of agreement. Professor T.R. Vox's expression shifted slightly, an unreadable glimmer passing through his dark eyes. Luck? No. Humans are not fragile in the way you understand the term. They are adaptive, persistent beyond reason, and deeply interconnected. But let me not lecture. Instead, let us observe. At his gesture, the holographic display behind him sprang to life. The room dimmed and a recording began to play. The footage showed a barren desert under a red-tinted sky, with a human figure sprinting across jagged terrain. The image zoomed closer, revealing the human, a young woman clad in battle-worn armor, her face smeared with dirt and blood. Her breathing was heavy, her steps uneven, but she pressed on. What you are watching, T.R. Vox said, his voice layered with gravity, is footage from an incident known as the Akrathian Stand. Humans had been asked to join a coalition of species in quelling a rebellion on the Akrathian moons. While most species provided firepower or tactical support, humans volunteered to operate in the most hostile conditions on the front lines. The class observed in silence as the recording continued. The woman in the footage stumbled, clutching her side where a dark stain spread across her armor. A plasma wound, clearly severe. Yet, instead of falling, she tightened a makeshift tourniquet around her waist, her hands shaking but precise. Professor, said a Nivran student, her bioluminescent skin flickering in confusion, why doesn't she retreat to safety? Her condition is critical. Because humans possess something few species can fully comprehend, T.R. Vox replied. They call it grit? The scene shifted as the human soldier reached a ridge overlooking an encampment of rebels. Despite her injury, she steadied her breathing and prepared her weapon, a projectile rifle that, by intergalactic standards, was primitive but brutally effective. As the class watched, she initiated a one-person assault on the camp. The rebels scrambled, their advanced technology no match for her relentless attack. Even when her weapon jammed, she fought hand-to-hand, using a combat knife to neutralize enemies twice her size. By the end of the footage, the woman was barely standing, her armor scorched, her body trembling from blood loss and exertion. Yet she raised a flare gun, signaling her allies that the path was clear. Gasps filled the room. Even the most skeptical students were now leaning forward, their disbelief giving way to astonishment. A Krillith student, his segmented body trembling slightly, broke the silence. This is madness. How can a species endure such pain and continue to function? Surely her body would have shut down. An excellent question, T.R. Vox said, nodding. Humans have an unusual relationship with pain and injury. While most species are biologically programmed to avoid harm at all costs, humans are capable of compartmentalizing suffering. They push through barriers that would incapacitate others. Some call it reckless. I call it extraordinary. Another student raised a hand. But why? Why would they willingly endure such torment? The professor's tone softened. Because to humans, survival is not just individual, it is collective. They endure not for themselves but for those who depend on them. In their eyes, pain is a temporary obstacle, but failure? Failure is unacceptable. As the footage ended, the lights in the classroom returned. The students sat in stunned silence, the earlier chatter replaced by quiet reflection. Professor T.R. Vox paced the room, his gaze sweeping over the young faces. Humans may appear fragile, he said, his voice carrying the weight of the lesson. Their bones can break, their flesh can tear, and their lifespans are short compared to ours. But their resilience is unmatched. They adapt, they endure, and they overcome. And when pushed to the brink, they do not crumble, they rise. The Uveran student who had spoken earlier lowered his gaze. I had no idea, he admitted quietly. I thought they were weak. They are weak, Tiarvox replied. And that is what makes them strong. Never forget that contradiction, for it is the essence of humanity. The bell chimed, signaling the end of the lecture. As the students filed out, their expressions betrayed a mixture of awe and unease. Humanity, they realized, was far more complex, and far more dangerous, than they had ever imagined. Tiarvox remained behind, staring at the now empty holographic display. A faint smile crossed his face as he muttered to himself, they may be fragile, but they are also unbreakable. The students left the classroom in a haze of hushed conversation. Tiarvox lingered behind, cleaning up the lecture notes on his hollow slate. His segmented fingers danced across the glowing interface as he prepared the next topic for tomorrow. Yet his mind was elsewhere, replaying the images of the human soldier from the Akrathian stand. Even he, a seasoned academic who had spent decades studying humans, couldn't fully reconcile their contradictions. As Tiarvox locked the classroom door and exited into the sprawling corridors of the Interstellar Academy, a soft voice interrupted his thoughts. Professor. He turned to see the Uveran student, Valak, standing with his clawed hands clasped in front of him. His iridescent scales shimmered faintly under the artificial lights, a nervous habit common to his species. Valak, Tiarvox said, inclining his head. Is there something I can help you with? Valak hesitated, his gaze darting toward the floor. I wanted to ask, the human in the footage. Did she survive? Tiarvox regarded him carefully before answering. Yes, she did. Barely. She was found unconscious but alive. Her injuries were severe, yet she recovered in a fraction of the time it would take most species to heal from such trauma. Valak's scales brightened in surprise. How? Their biology doesn't seem particularly advanced. Indeed it isn't, Tiarvox agreed, folding his hands. Humans don't rely on advanced biology to survive. They rely on their sheer will to live, and on each other. Valak frowned, clearly trying to process this. But why go to such extremes? Why not retreat and preserve oneself for another day? Tiarvox sighed, gesturing for the student to follow him. As they walked, he spoke. You must understand, Valak, that human survival is rooted in cooperation. Their evolutionary history shaped them to depend on their group for survival. A lone human is vulnerable, but a group of humans? They are unstoppable. Their instincts drive them to protect their own, even at great personal cost. Valak fell silent, his mind clearly racing with this new perspective. Finally, he asked, Have you ever met a human in person? Tiarvox smiled faintly. Oh, many times. And each time I am reminded of their peculiarities. They are curious to a fault, endlessly resourceful, and astonishingly empathetic. But do not mistake empathy for weakness. If you threaten what they care about, you will see a side of humanity that is anything but fragile. The next day, Tiarvox's lecture hall was packed. Word of the previous lesson had spread through the academy like wildfire. Students from other courses had come to see what the commotion was about. Tiarvox wasn't surprised. Humanity had a way of capturing attention, even unintentionally. When the room finally settled, Tiarvox addressed the audience. It seems we have an extended class today. Very well. Let us continue where we left off. The lights dimmed and a new hologram appeared. This time, it showed a human medical facility on a battlefield. Injured soldiers lay on stretchers, their wounds bound in crude bandages. Doctors and medics worked tirelessly, their faces etched with exhaustion. This, Tiarvox said, is another example of humanity's resilience. When faced with impossible odds, they innovate. Their medical technologies may not be the most advanced in the galaxy, but their ability to adapt under pressure is unparalleled. The scene shifted to a young human medic treating a wounded ally. The medic's hands were steady as they applied an improvised plasma seal to a gaping wound. Despite the dire circumstances, the medic cracked a joke, eliciting a weak chuckle from the injured soldier. They use humor, Tiarvox continued, even in the darkest moments. It is their way of coping, of reminding themselves that they are still alive. It is a psychological tool as much as a cultural trait. A Telvanni student, her crystalline body refracting the dim light, raised a hand. Professor, how do humans maintain morale in such conditions? Surely their mental state would deteriorate? Ah, an excellent question, Tiarvox said, his tone warming. Humans possess an extraordinary capacity for hope. Even when the situation seems utterly hopeless, they find ways to inspire each other. They are storytellers, dreamers, and believers in a better future. It is this hope that sustains them. The lecture continued, delving into human history, their struggles, and their triumphs. T.R. Vox explained how humanity's past, filled with conflict, adversity, and hardship, had forged them into the tenacious species they were today. The students listened with rapt attention, their earlier skepticism replaced by a growing respect. As the class ended, T.R. Vox addressed a final question from a Kren student, whose insectoid features glistened with curiosity. "Professor, you've shown us their strengths. But surely humans have weaknesses as well?" "Of course," T.R. Vox replied. "Their emotional nature can lead to impulsive decisions. Their physical bodies, while resilient, are not invulnerable. But perhaps their greatest weakness is also their greatest strength, their capacity for connection. Humans care deeply, often to their own detriment. Yet it is this very trait that makes them so formidable. To protect what they love, they will endure anything. And that, my dear students, is why humanity is not to be underestimated." As the students filed out, T.R. Vox watched them with a sense of satisfaction. The lesson had been more than academic. It had been a glimpse into the soul of a species that refused to be defined by its limitations. In the back of his mind, T.R. Vox wondered if the galaxy truly understood what it was dealing with. Humans were not just survivors. They were thrivers, dreamers, and fighters. And when the time came, the universe would learn the full extent of their strength. In the days following T.R. Vox's groundbreaking lectures, the Interstellar Academy was abuzz with debate and discussion. The students, once dismissive of humanity, now found themselves wrestling with newfound respect, and a fair bit of unease. Humanity's capacity for resilience and unity, particularly in the face of overwhelming odds, had sparked fascination, admiration, and fear. Valak, the Uvran student, couldn't get the images out of his mind. The footage of human soldiers, battered and bloodied, still fighting with an almost unearthly determination, replayed in his thoughts like a haunting melody. Their humor amidst chaos, their willingness to sacrifice for each other, it was alien to him in the most literal sense. Determined to learn more, Valak spent his evenings in the Academy's archive halls, poring over every piece of information he could find about humanity. Historical accounts, scientific studies, and cultural analyses filled his hollow slate. The more he learned, the more questions he had. One evening, as Valak sifted through yet another stack of archive data, he noticed a faint glow to his side. It was T.R. Vox, his professor, holding his own hollow slate. "Couldn't get enough, could you?" T.R. Vox said with a knowing smile. Valak dipped his head in embarrassment. I can't stop thinking about them, Professor. Every time I think I've understood humans, I find something else that defies logic." "That's because humanity isn't logical," T.R. Vox replied, taking a seat across from Valak. "Not in the way most species are. Their strength doesn't come from predictable behavior or calculated actions. It comes from their unpredictability." Valak hesitated, then asked, "Professor, have they always been like this? Resilient, I mean?" T.R. Vox leaned back in his chair, his expression contemplative. "No. Resilience isn't a trait that comes easily. It's forged through hardship. Humanity's history is filled with conflict, struggle, and adversity. They've faced extinction-level events, both natural and self-inflicted. Each time they adapted. They learned." He gestured to Valak's hollow slate, which displayed an old Earth documentary on human history. "That adaptability is their greatest weapon. When one path fails, they create another. They don't rely on tradition or conformity the way other species might. They experiment, they innovate, and sometimes they make mistakes. But they always move forward." Valak frowned, his scales rippling with unease. "But how can we predict them, Professor? How can the galaxy coexist with a species so chaotic?" T.R. Vox chuckled softly. "You can't predict them, Valak. Not entirely. And that's what makes them so dangerous. But it's also what makes them invaluable allies. Humanity thrives on connection. If you can earn their trust, they will stand with you against any foe. But if you betray them..." His voice trailed off, leaving an ominous silence. Valak stared at the screen, watching as the documentary shifted to images of humans rebuilding after a devastating war. Their cities, once reduced to rubble, rose again. Their people, scarred but unbroken, marched forward. "How do they keep doing it?" Valak murmured, almost to himself. "They have something most species lack," T.R. Vox said. "A concept they call hope. It's not just a word to them, it's a driving force. Humans believe against all odds that tomorrow can be better than today. That belief fuels them even in their darkest moments, The following week, TRVox announced a special event, a live Q&A session with an actual human ambassador. The news spread like wildfire, and the lecture hall was filled to capacity on the day of the event. Students, professors, and even high-ranking officials from various species crammed into the space, eager for a chance to interact with one of the galaxy's most enigmatic species. The ambassador, a middle-aged woman named Commander Elena Hayes, entered the hall with an air of calm confidence. She wore a simple uniform, adorned with the emblem of the Terran Union. Her presence was commanding yet approachable, a balance that immediately intrigued the audience. TRVox introduced her with a flourish. "Ladies and gentlemen, beings of all species, it is my honor to present Commander Elena Hayes, a decorated officer of the Terran Union and a representative of humanity." The room erupted in applause, though there was an undercurrent of tension. Many in the audience were still grappling with their preconceived notions about humans, and Hayes' presence brought those feelings to the forefront. When the applause died down, Hayes stepped forward and addressed the crowd. "Thank you for having me here. It's not every day that I get to speak to such a diverse group. I'm here to answer your questions, so don't hold back. Let's get to it." A Telvanni student raised their crystalline arm. "Commander Hayes, what motivates humans to keep fighting, even when victory seems impossible?" Hayes smiled faintly, her gaze steady. "That's a good question. For humans, it's not just about winning. It's about what we're fighting for. Whether it's our families, our friends, or our ideals, we fight because we believe some things are worth protecting. And sometimes we fight because there's no other choice. Survival isn't optional." A Kren student clicked their mandibles thoughtfully. "But doesn't such persistence come at a cost? Surely the toll on your species must be immense." "It is," Hayes admitted. "We bear scars, both physical and emotional. But those scars remind us of what we've endured. They're a testament to our strength. And when we look at them, we know we can survive whatever comes next." The questions continued, each one peeling back another layer of humanity's enigmatic nature. Hayes answered with honesty and humility, her words leaving a profound impact on the audience. After the session, Valak approached Hayes, his scales shimmering with curiosity. "Commander Hayes, may I ask you something?" "Of course," Hayes replied, her expression warm. "Do humans ever fear failure?" Valak asked. "Or is your resilience so strong that you're immune to it?" Hayes' smile softened. "We fear failure all the time. But fear doesn't stop us. If anything, it drives us to try harder. Resilience isn't about being fearless, it's about facing your fears and pushing through them. That's what makes us human." Valak nodded slowly, her words resonating deeply. As he watched Hayes walk away, he realized something profound. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology, their biology, or even their resilience. It was their unyielding belief in themselves and in each other. For the first time, Valak understood why humanity was not to be underestimated. They were fragile, yes, but they were also unbreakable. And in a galaxy filled with challenges, that made them the most formidable species of all. The following weeks brought a shift in perspective across the Interstellar Academy. The session with Commander Hayes had left an indelible mark, not just on the students, but on every being who had heard her speak. The humans were no longer seen as fragile anomalies in a galaxy of superior predators. They were now enigmas, powerful in their persistence, terrifying in their unpredictability, and awe-inspiring in their hope. Valak couldn't stop reflecting on what he had learned. The Academy's corridors were abuzz with debates, but none could find a consensus. What made humans the way they were? Was it their chaotic history? Their biology? Or was it something intangible, something that defied analysis? Despite the unanswered questions, the Galactic Union saw a valuable opportunity. Discussions began about extending alliances and trade deals with humanity. Some species viewed this as a tactical move to harness the strength of their resilience, while others genuinely wanted to understand them better. Either way, humanity was no longer on the periphery of galactic affairs. They were moving to the center. However, not all species welcomed this new understanding. The more militant factions of the galactic community saw humanity as a threat. To them, a species that could endure anything was a liability, a wild card that could upset the delicate balance of power. Rumors began circulating of secret councils convening to discuss ways to contain humanity before it became too dominant. Valak was troubled by these whispers. He had grown to admire humanity, their flaws as much as their strengths. He couldn't reconcile the idea of containing such a species with the ideals of the Galactic Union, which prided itself on inclusion and diversity. To Valak, humanity's resilience wasn't a threat, it was an inspiration. One evening, while walking through the academy gardens, Valak encountered Vox. The professor was seated on a bench, gazing at the stars. "Lost in thought, Professor?" Valak asked, taking a seat beside him. "Always," Vox replied with a wry smile. "And you?" "I've been thinking about humanity," Valak admitted. "I don't understand why some see them as a danger. Isn't their resilience something we should learn from?" Vox nodded. "It is. But fear has a way of distorting perception. Many species are unsettled by humanity because they can't control them. Humans don't follow the same patterns or logic as other beings. That unpredictability makes them dangerous to some. But to me it makes them fascinating," Valak said. "They've shown us what's possible when you refuse to give up, even in the face of insurmountable odds." Vox smiled. "You're starting to understand, Valak. Humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy might not be their technology or their resilience. It might be their perspective. They remind us that strength isn't about being unbreakable. It's about getting back up after you've been broken." The pivotal moment came months later, when an old enemy of the Galactic Union, the Drathek Collective, launched a surprise invasion on the Union's outer colonies. The Drathek were brutal and efficient, their fleets overwhelming the colony's defenses within days. The Galactic Union was thrown into chaos. The member species convened an emergency summit, but the deliberations were slow. Each species argued over strategy, resources, and priorities. Time was running out, and the colonies were on the brink of annihilation. It was during this crisis that humanity made its mark. Without waiting for the Union's approval, the Terran Union mobilized its fleets. Human ships, smaller and less advanced than their counterparts, surged into Drathek-occupied space. They engaged the enemy with a ferocity that shocked even the most battle-hardened observers. The humans fought like they had nothing to lose. They used unconventional tactics, exploiting weaknesses the Drathek hadn't even realized they had. Their fleet sustained heavy losses, but they never faltered. For every ship they lost, they took 2 Drathek ships with them. And then came the moment that would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. In the final battle, a Drathek dreadnought, bristling with weaponry, bore down on the last human stronghold. The human flagship, the Resolute, was crippled, its hull breached and its systems failing. Yet even in their desperation the humans refused to retreat. Commander Elena Hayes, who had once addressed the Academy, now stood on the bridge of the Resolute. Her face was bloodied, her uniform torn, but her resolve was unshaken. "Activate the overdrive engines," she ordered. Her crew hesitated. "Commander, that will destroy the ship." Hayes's eyes burned with determination. "I know. But it will also destroy the dreadnought. And it will give the Union time to regroup." "Do it." The Resolute charged forward, its engines glowing with an intensity that rivaled the stars. The Drathek dreadnought fired, its weapons tearing through the human ship. But the Resolute did not stop. It collided with the dreadnought in a blinding explosion, obliterating both ships. The sacrifice was not in vain. The delay allowed the Galactic Union's fleets to rally and drive the Drathek back. Humanity's actions had turned the tide of the war. In the aftermath, the galaxy was forever changed. The humans were no longer seen as fragile newcomers. They were heroes, their resilience and courage earning them a place of honor in the Galactic Union. Valak, now a graduate of the Academy, often thought back to those days. He had witnessed humanity's true strength, not just their resilience, but their willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. It was a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. As he looked up at the stars, Valak felt a sense of hope. Humanity had shown the galaxy that strength wasn't about domination. It was about unity, perseverance, and the belief that even in the darkest moments, there was always a way forward. And in that belief, the galaxy found its greatest ally.